Thank you. The session actually moderated by Dr. Nandan Mukherjee. Nandan Mukherjee, please come and join us.
Without any further ado, good afternoon everyone again. On behalf of the Center for Climate Change and Environmental Research in BRAC University, the Economic Relations Divisions under the Ministry of Finance and Binks Institute for Sustainability in University of Dundee, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's side event titled Bridging Climate Finance Gaps. I am Nandan Mukherjee. I served as a senior lecturer and the director of the Binks Institute of Sustainability at the University of Dundee. It is my absolute honor to facilitate and moderating this important session. Distinguished guests, acknowledging Bangladesh stands as one of the world's most climate vulnerable nations, and while our coastal belt often captures global attention for its exposure to cyclones, salinity and sea level rise, our hilly region also face equally serious but less recognized challenges. Landslide, flash flood, and changing rainfall patterns increasingly threaten both lives and livelihoods in this area. The objectives of today's discussions is to explore how national and international climate finance can be more effectively directed to address the diverse climate change risk and vulnerabilities in the coastal and hilly areas of Bangladesh. We are honored to have a distinguished panel here today who will bring rich perspective from policy, research, implementation, and youth leadership. With that note, I'd now like to invite our keynote speaker, Ms. Rofa Khanum, Assistant Director at C3R BRAC University, to deliver her keynote address on the current landscape of climate finance and regional disparity. Thank you, Rofa. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, moderator, for giving me the floor to deliver the keynote of today's event. I am Rofa Khanum, Assistant Director at the Center for Climate Change and Environmental Research, BRAC University, Bangladesh. It is a pleasure to be here at COP and to share insight from our recent work on climate risk, vulnerability, and the climate change finance gap across Bangladesh's most exposed regions. As you can see from the title, Bridging the Climate Finance Gap, Inclusive Adaptation for Bangladesh Coastal and Hilly Region, today's presentation takes us into two distinct geographies of Bangladesh, the coastal plains and the hilly uplands, both deeply affected by climate change, yet experiencing very different realities in terms of adaptation support and funding flows. Over the next few minutes, we will explore the comparative climate vulnerabilities faced by coastal and hilly communities, the landscape of climate change, climate finance, and project investment across those regions, and how disparities in funding exacerbate the vulnerabilities of hilly communities, often leaving them at the margin of climate resilient efforts. Our goal is to shed light on why equitable and inclusive climate finance must go beyond geography to ensure that communities in all ecosystems, especially those less visible in the funding narrative, have equal access to adaptation opportunities. By the end, I hope you can collectively reflect on how policy, finance, and community-led adaptation can coverage on to bridge this gap, ensuring no region, no community is left behind in Bangladesh climate change journey. Let's begin with Bangladesh, an agrarian South Asian nation bordered by India on the north, east, and west, and by the Bay of Bengal to the south. Over the last few years, Bangladesh has constantly ranked among the top 10 countries most at risk from natural disaster, standing 9th in the World Risk Report 2024 with a risk score of 27.73. It is evident that the changing climate is amplifying the occurrence and impact of various disasters across Bangladesh. Severely, a study shows that the adverse signs of climate change heavily already began to appear in Bangladesh, and the impact are not proportionate. In addition, several key factors elevated the climate change risk and its associated impacts in Bangladesh, such as the confluence of major river system increase the country exposure to flood, low-lying topography making it highly vulnerable to sea level rise, and high population density amplifies the human impact of climate shocks. These interconnected factors affect multiple sectors such as water resource, agriculture, health, infrastructure, wash, and fisheries, among others, creating a complex and multidimensional climate landscape in Bangladesh. Recently, Bangladesh government has adopted National Adaptation Plan in 2022. The country has been divided into 11 climate stress areas based on 14 identified past and emerging hazards like cyclone, flood, sea level rise, lightning, cold snap, landsliding, extreme temperature, and erratic rainfall. Among the other climatic stress areas, coastal and hilly areas have diverse climate change risks. For example, the coastal zone is highly vulnerable to cyclone, sea level rise, and salinity intrusion, while the hilly region are exposed to flash flood, landslides, and short duration heavy rainfall. Despite facing severe climate-related hazard, these two regions have been approached differently in the terms of climate risk management and adaptation measures. In this slide, I will showcase the climate change impact of Bangladesh coastal zone. Stretching over 710 kilometers, covers about 32% of the country's land area and is home to nearly 40 million people. Currently, the region is already facing multiple challenges due to the changing climate, such as sea level rise, leading to the inundation of polders and low-lying lands, salinity intrusion, contaminating surface and groundwater, and reducing access to potable water. Increased health risks, including a higher incidence of waterborne disease such as diarrhea and dysentery. Moreover, displacement due to flooding and erosion is already impacting about 0.09% of residents annually, and socioeconomic vulnerabilities remain high, with around 36% of the population in coastal areas dependent on agriculture and related livelihoods, making them highly exposed to climate-induced shocks. According to the climate projection, in the coming decades, the coastal zone is projected to experience up to a 60% increase in flood inundation, cyclones, and storm surge reaching 1.5 to 9 meters, causing billion in damage and widespread health risk, and salinity intrusion effective 31 coastal upazilas. Now shifting our focus to the Chittagong Hill Tracts or CST. This region includes the three hill districts of Rangamati, Bandarban, and Khagrachuri, located in southeastern Bangladesh. Together they cover about 13% of the country's total land area, roughly 14,570 square kilometers. The CST is home to 11 ethnic communities, each with distinct cultural identities and traditional livelihoods that are deeply intertwined with forest and land resources. However, this unique ecosystem and way of life are increasingly under threat from climate change and environmental degradation. The main climate-related challenges in the hilly region include rising temperature that affect crop productivity and water balance, irregular and unpredictable rainfall, which leads to both flash flood and prolonged dry spells, deforestation driven by fuel wood collection, shifting cultivation, and unplanned development, severe soil erosion that reduce soil fertility and increase landslide risk and water scarcity, especially during the dry season when streams and natural springs often dry up. These challenges are exposed to intensify in the coming decades, leading to growing livelihood insecurity and migration pressure. Now let's look at how climate finance is distributed between Bangladesh coastal and hilly region and what this tells us about the equity of our adaptation effort. At the national level, through the Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund, we see a very clear pattern of imbalance. Out of 654 completed projects, about 94% were implemented in coastal areas, while only 6% were directed to the hilly region. Most of these projects focus on infrastructure development such as embankment and dams, as well as livelihood generation and disaster preparedness in coastal zones. Even among the 252 ongoing projects, the trends remains the same. About 43% of projects are in the coastal belt compared to barely 5% in the Chittagong hill tracts. This means that while the coastal region continue to receive the lion's share of funding, the hilly areas, which are also highly vulnerable, remain largely overlooked. When you look beyond national program and turn to international climate finance, the picture is equally uneven. The Green Climate Fund, for instance, currently supports 7 Bangladesh-specific projects and 3 multi-country projects involving Bangladesh. These initiatives address resilient housing and livelihoods, energy efficiency technologies, community-led adaptation, and climate-resilient infrastructure. However, around 70% of GCF adaptation funding in Bangladesh is allocated to coastal resilience, while the hilly region received no dedicated project at all. This reflects a systematic equity gap, a gap that leaves indigenous and upland communities excluded from global adaptation finance flows. Similarly, Global Environment Facility invests about 11.7% of its Bangladesh portfolio in coastal region, but only 2.9% in the hilly areas, again revealing a stark disparity. On a more positive note, some initiatives have taken a more inclusive approach. For example, the UN RED Bangladesh National Program, the Adaptation Fund, and the local government initiative on climate change called LOGIC, which is supported by the European Union, SIDA, and DANIDA, have directed funding to both coastal. These projects show that inclusive climate finance is not only possible but essential for balanced and equitable adaptation across diverse geographies. In summary, while coastal Bangladesh has rightly received significant investment due to its exposure to cyclone, salinity, and sea level rise, the hilly region remain on the margin of national and international funding priorities. If we are to achieve inclusive and just adaptation future, climate finance framework must consciously bridge this divide, ensuring that the people of the Chittagong hill tracts are not left behind towards resilience. As we move forward, it is essential that our climate finance framework not only address vulnerability but also ensure regional equity. The data clearly shows that while coastal regions have benefited from significant investment and hilly areas remain underfunded and underserved, to bridge these gaps, several key actions are needed. First, we must establish national equity targets within Bangladesh Climate Change Trust BCCT allocations. This means setting clear benchmark to ensure that every region, including the Chittagong hill tracts, receive fair and proportionate funding based on its vulnerability. Second, we should develop a dedicated climate investment framework for the hilly region. Such a framework would guide targeted projects on watershed management, forest restoration, and resilient livelihood, tailored to the unique topography and social context of these areas. Third, we need to include representatives from the hilly regions and indigenous communities in Bangladesh Climate Change Trust project selection committees. Their participation will ensure that funding priorities truly reflect the voice and needs of those most affected by climate change. Fourth, it is crucial to conduct region-specific vulnerabilities and climate risk assessments. Current data often generalize Bangladesh climate risk, but without this aggregated data, region-level insights, funding decision will continue to favor more visible coastal vulnerabilities. Fifth, we must encourage multi-regional and ecosystem-based adaptation projects. For example, watershed or river basin approach that connect the hills and coast can build resilience across entire landscapes rather than in isolated zones. Sixth, we need to strengthen transparency and public reporting on how funds are distributed across region. This will help build trust, ensure accountability, and allow for evidence-based adjustment in future allocation. Seventh, we should mobilize additional financing from both donor agencies and the private sector, especially for the underfunded hilly region. And finally, all these must align with national climate finance policies that are grounded in equity, inclusion, and climate justice. Only then we can ensure that every community from the coastal belt to the hill slopes shares equally in Bangladesh's journey towards a resilient and sustainable future. With that, I would like to conclude. Thank you everyone for listening to me. As we conclude, let us remember that climate resilience is not just about protecting ecosystem. It is about protecting people. Every community, whether along the coast or in the hills, deserve equal access to resource, opportunities, and the means to adapt with dignity. Bridging the climate finance gap is not only a question of funding, but to fairness of ensuring that no region, no group of people is left behind in our national response to climate change. Thank you all for your attention and your shared commitment to building an inclusive, resilient Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Rufa, for delivering such a nice presentation. The message is clear. We are not seeing any equitable distribution of funding between the coastal and hilly region, and that is affecting the hard-to-reach communities, especially those who are left behind. At this stage, before saying without any further ado, I'd like to move into the panel discussion, and it is my pleasure to welcome our distinguished panels to join us for a dialogue on bridging climate finance gaps between Bangladesh coastal and hilly region. We have with us today Mr. Shah Abdul Sadi, Additional Secretary, Economic Relations Divisions, Ministry of Finance, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. We have got Dr. A.K.M. Saiful Islam, Professor, Institute of Water and Flood Management, Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. We have Ms. Ashley Toombs, Head of Climate Hub BRAC, and Ms. Farzana Farooq Jumu, co-founder of Cut Pencil and youth advisor on climate change to the UN Secretary General. Dear respective panelists, I am now going to request you all to come to the stage and take your seats. Together we are going to discuss how Bangladesh can strengthen its policy framework, leverage climate data, enhance local access to finance, and ensure greater participation and transparency in the use of climate funds. It's okay. This is just among us. Let's hear each other. Let's have a internal discussion. Okay. Okay. Let's have a conversation. Saiful sir, I'll be very intrigued to hear your opinion that we can clearly see that there is a huge funding discrepancy between coastal and hilly region, and at the same time, it's not only the scarcity is not only affecting those two regions, but the country as a whole as well. So, with profound background in science, how can improve climate risk modeling and data from these areas influence national priorities, funding decisions for adaptation?
Thank you very much, Dr. Nandan. It's always a pleasure to be with the BRAC University, and this program is very, I think, interesting for Bangladesh participants and around the world, because hilly region and data scarce region actually suffering from many different ways to project risk and vulnerability. We have seen a very good keynote presentation from Ms. Rofa about the data, about the finance gap I think in the mitigating or in adapting or loss and damage initiative, or even disaster risk management. But unfortunately, these regions, we have not only the resource but also the potential data, like hilly region. It is not always easy to install an observation like rain gauge or the water level measurement. I still remember I went to Tahirpur to see the flash flood region, and maybe many of you don't know that hilly regions in Bangladesh also suffer from extreme climate change. For example, flash flood, for example, landslides, and also sometimes very heavy rainfall inundation. But the possible how to make this reduction of the risks is challenging. For example, prediction, very good landslide modeling with high resolution, predicting very good flash flood modeling, often not easy. In the numerical challenge is very high because the orographic condition make all on a sudden convection, orographic rainfall occur, and there is not much time, little time. Providing the early warning to that period, to that vulnerable area, also difficult, and we need support from our neighboring country because the reason is very interesting. Bangladesh is a delta of three big rivers. Only 7% catchment inside Bangladesh, 93% is outside Bangladesh. That means we are depending on the water high flow or low flow coming from the upstream countries, and the real-time information from upstream country data and even land geographic condition, like how much the soil condition or the land use type or the elevation, that needs a data sharing among the transboundary river basin sharing countries. And unfortunately, we are not good at that yet. We have only very few stations where we get a periodic update from neighboring countries, like particularly from the India. But these big basins in the Brahmaputra and others, even Meghna basin, we do not have much data point. So if we have a real-time observation, that is much better because then we can improve our models. Secondly, communicating with the people, because some area like in the Chittagong area, hill tracts area, people are not, most of them indigenous and the society, we call it Pahari. They are mountainous area, not able to always communicate with them. Fortunately, in these days, we can use mobile communication technology to reach to them. And considering that why this initiative data modeling is important, not only the disaster management, but also long-term planning. Like government has prepared the National Adaptation Plan, government also prepared the National NDC, Determined Contribution. These documents are helping to planning for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So this is important that this improved data modeling for the hilly region will be helpful for those planning. And finally, I would like to say that this gap, finance gap, we have seen that is not sustainable for the country because population living this vulnerability should be actually bring into their normalcy. And in future, we see this type of region will be more and more vulnerable. So where I think we have lack of observation, lack of data, lack of modeling capacity, even the analysis of this data. We have national center, but they need more funding on that. And to Bangladesh or some other developing country that people thought it's a waste of money because it's not planting a tree or it's not embankment. It's what will happen to if we spend on the data modeling and information. But it's real time. It's actually saved the life. It actually saved the damage of the property. So, and not only the present time, also the future. And some area in the coastal area also we see that people are suffering from climate change. I just like to a few more points on the climate change. We have been seeing from World Meteorological Organization report, Earth is observing a alarming and serious situation. The greenhouse gas is highest temperature record last 3 years is record breaking, and it's already crossing 1.5 degree for last 5 years. And then we also see sea ice extent is reduced, accelerated rate of sea level rise. We see ocean acidification, And then Bangladesh also suffer from a strong every season we see at least 2 cyclone every year. So this in the past we have seen long gap in the cyclone. We also see urban flood and flash flood. So considering all this increasing and frequency and duration of the natural hazards, I think Bangladesh has to be prepared for the next challenge. Or they already, I think, prepared their national adaptation plan. But the now time, actually, from this COP is for implementation. Is the time that we should start thinking about how we rapidly implement the documents we prepared, and that needs actually support from developed countries. We have been heard from the past that from 2020 there will be $100 billion per year, but which defer to 2026. And this is pity, because if we can 5 years before we can start our adaptation process much stronger. We have done using our own sources. Just one example, in the coastal area, we have 140 coastal polders, and that polders are from 1960-70. It needs improvement. So that's why government take a project, is coastal improvement project, coastal embankment improvement project, CIP, but that needs funding, and the government doesn't have enough money, so they get 10 polders out of 140. Because it's a huge expensive, as you know, it's earthen polder, earthen embankment, we call it polder because enclosed. So, and then there is a huge scarcity of drinking water, coastal area and hilly area, because the source is abundance, the lack of fresh water supply, glacier was met, salinity increased, the water, fresh water body became saline. So all these, Bangladesh need more support from the countries which are developed, which has historic responsibility on the climate change. So I wish that from this COP and what we are coming here, that a more support will be needed. We already see lots of finance gap and also lots of disparity among the different regions of the country. So I stop here. I'll be happy to hear from our distinguished colleagues and others. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Saiful Bhai. What else can be better other than hearing from one of the world's leading scientists on climate change? Thank you so much. Then I'll request Ashley, considering her profound experience of working in BRAC, and especially one of the most important divisions, Climate Hub. So can you tell us about your experience, about what approaches has BRAC found most effective in accessing and allocating adaptation finance to the most vulnerable local communities, especially in the hard-to-reach areas?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm going to remove the headphones like you did. That was a good idea. Okay, you can still hear me okay? You just raise your hand if you can. So I wasn't sure before I started this morning if I was going to need to introduce BRAC, but I think with this audience, I don't need to explain I don't need to explain what BRAC is. It's with today, and I'm grateful to have heard Ralph Appa's remarks and your remarks. I'm going to, as you can imagine with BRAC's experience, really sort of zoom in to the local community level to share some of our lessons and sort of the trajectory that we're on with this climate adaptation financing. I think most importantly, the point to make in the out front is that in our experience, the challenge isn't simply mobilizing the adaptation finance, but it's actually ensuring that it translates to locally meaningful outcomes. So in other words, funds must reach those who need them most and in forms that they can actually use. So let me share 5 approaches. One is centralized community-led programming. So one of the most effective approaches we have found is decentralization, empowering local governance and community-based organizations to make their own financing decisions. We found that adaptation works best when communities identify their own priorities through participatory risk mapping and vulnerability assessments as 2 examples. This community-led model ensures ownership, transparency, and relevance. It means adaptation finance isn't imposed, but it's co-created with those directly affected. The second approach would be integrating finance with livelihood resilience. So adaptation finance must be tied to livelihoods and economic resilience, not treated as standalone projects. At BRAC, we use bundled interventions that link climate funding with agriculture support, microfinance, and enterprise development. So for example, in coastal areas, we've supported saline-tolerant crops and adaptive aquaculture, while in hilly regions, we're exploring approaches that reduce soil erosion and improve productivity. The key lesson here is that finance for adaptation is most effective when it helps families secure and diversify their incomes, leading to empowerment, not dependency. The third approach would be building local financial access mechanisms. We've been able to leverage our extensive microfinance networks to channel small-scale climate investments directly to households, particularly to female or women entrepreneurs. We've also piloted community resilience funds. So these funds allow local committees to quickly access small grants for infrastructure or emergency response. These mechanisms reduce transaction costs, they ensure faster response times, and they strengthen accountability. They make adaptation finance accessible, they make it nimble and responsive to local realities. The fourth is partnering for blended and innovative finance. So one of these success factors for this would be partnerships, designing blended finance models with the government, with the private sector, and with other development partners or our own colleagues within BRAC. By combining grants, concessional loans, and private investment, we're expanding the scale and sustainability of community-based adaptation. The fifth approach would be strengthening local capacity and data systems. We've learned that building capacity is likely as important as actually the delivering of the funds themselves. So in this case, we train local institutions in project design, in proposal writing and monitoring to help them independently access and manage adaptation finance through our Climate Bridge Fund program as an example. Digital tools and participatory data collection also strengthen transparency and accountability, and we're working towards getting to a place where, when appropriate, communities themselves track outcomes. I think moving forward, the new frontier for us will be ensuring that all of our adaptation-related activities, including financing, will also include access to actionable climate information services. This will take time to roll out, but we know that putting information related to current weather, any upcoming emergency response situations, seasonal, sub-seasonal forecasts into the hands of local communities in a way that they can both understand and act upon is vitally important. And we're developing partnerships and designing programs now that are adding in this critical component. Ultimately for BRAC, the most effective adaptation finance isn't determined by the size of the fund, but by the strength of the local systems when they deliver it. When communities co-design, when they co-manage, when they monitor their own adaptation projects, finance becomes a tool for empowerment and not just aid. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ashley. What could be better? The way you gave us very specific guidelines from BRAC's experience that how can we better utilize climate finance and getting better access to climate finance. It's amazing. Thank you so much again. Now I'll move to Ms. Farzana Farooq Jhumo. She is one of the champions for youth-led accountability and community participation. So based on that, I would like to ask you, how can youth-led accountability and community participation strengthen the transparency and impact of climate at the local level?
Thank you so much. This is again, I will also remove this. Thank you for this question. And when I was invited for this panel, I actually looked into the session title, and it says "Listen from Bangladesh." So then, it's automatic that people will learn from Bangladesh, and that's how I feel about Bangladesh in many sectors. It's starting from how resilient Bangladesh is. It's starting from how youth are working in climate sector. Not just today when you see youth wave everywhere, but Bangladesh has this cyclone preparedness program, which has started in 1960s and still working because young people are working on ground, and it includes like being on ground, supporting people, but also includes the accountability measure of it. So when we think about accountability, for me, I see young people being there. So like I have some of the suggestions like how other can learn from us, and it's sorry, it starts with like monitoring audits, because young people are like on ground trying to explore, happy to explore. So like when they're on ground, they can connect with people. There are many negative impact where people talk about how young people connect through social media, through like one another, but that's also a power. They connect with one another. That's why they can monitor the social impact. They can talk about the social impact. They can change the social impact. The next thing which really comes is like building this network and community. From Bangladesh, if you're trying to learn, Bangladesh is currently going through a demographic dividend. So majority of Bangladesh is currently majority, I would say a big number of people from Bangladesh is currently young people under 35. And so when they are making decisions, they are building communities. They are not building communities for today. They're building communities for tomorrow. They're building communities which will last long. So when they are building these communities, it's also easy for them to go around, monitor things, hold people accountable, because it's a long-term space where we can work together. And then I think it's always evident that young people are very good at working on data collection, working on research. Sir was talking about data and how we have a gap in data, and I think that's where young people can come, where they can collect those data, analyze those data, and I would say they are better in AI use than older people. So obviously they can like also use those technologies to have better ways with data. And then like always what you will see in Bangladesh is public awareness run by young people. Yes, I would say sometimes we might not have the depth of the knowledge, sometimes, not always, but sometimes we really can reach the last mile. So public awareness on the basic, on a certain level, young people can actually lead so that other people can take that forward from here. So that's something really what young people can do. Finally, when there is a long sort of, like there is a lot of people coming together, being aware, they actually hold government accountable, and they actually make sure that government make decisions that make changes. And that's what young people do. We have seen not only in Bangladesh but all over the world, and I would say that's what currently young people are doing best, making government do things which is beneficiary for young people, for long term, and for the planet. Thank you.
Thanks, Jumu, for your very insightful comment on the how we can get to my last question to this section of panel discussion to Mr. Sadi. From your perspective of working in the economic relations divisions, what key policies and institutional reforms are needed to ensure that our climate finance is allocated equitably across Bangladesh's coastal and hilly region?
Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee, and the panelists. I'm really happy to be here. and I'm really excited to have a kind of innovative formulation of the problem of adaptation investment, the level of granularity that we need to reach, that climate finance gap mitigation is not only about the amount of finances, but also about addressing those who are disproportionately affected. So definitely the National Adaptation Plan that we have has rightly identified and prioritized the climate stress area. And if we look at the adaptation plan, then we see that coastal areas are the first and second climate stress area. And the third one is the Chattogram Hill Tracts, CHT. So in my opinion, that now it is time to deliver in terms of finance, as finance is the key enabler for the implementation and for the translation of the ambition and the plans into actions. So that's why I think that reformation of institution and policies have long been a cliche kind, a buzzword, but I think this is now getting a shape in Bangladesh in terms of climate action and climate financing. If I refer to the establishment of the country platform, that Bangladesh Climate Development Partnership, so that country platform can achieve the synergies that we need. Now, why do we need to achieve the synergies? Because if we look at the adaptation interventions, we find that multiple actors are involved in the process, different ministries and divisions are involved in the process. So I would say that synergies in terms of actors, synergies in terms of climate actions, and synergies in terms of financing. So let me unpack the actor dimension. If we look at the adaptation needs, then we find, for example, the line ministries, Ministry of Agriculture is involved in that, Ministry of Land is involved in the process, Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries are involved in the process. And in the same way, CSOs like BRAC and other organizations are also involved, and private sector actors are also involved. And most importantly, if we look at the external financing, then development partners are involved. So we need to, and also academia, like the research and the data, they are also involved. So BCDP and this country platform and all the working groups under it, 4 working groups, for example, external financing, this is what we look at, ERD, from ERD. So we, in the working group, we have these mix of actors, development partners, CSOs, academia, and also the private sector actors. So we would like to mobilize them so that we can improve on the coherence and consistency, and we can break with the silos that we work in. So, and now move on to the actions, why we need to synergy in terms of climate actions. If you look at the adaptation in the hill tracts and hilly regions, then preservation of biodiversity is very important. And also the prevention of land degradation is also important. So we not only we are looking at the adaptation aspect, focusing on UNFCCC, we need to also focus on the UNCCD and CBD, and also RED++. So these are the synergies in climate actions, because why we need it, this is at the global level, but at the national level, different ministries and departments are assigned with UNCCD interventions, CBD interventions, and UNFCCC financing interventions. So if these line ministries and departments can synergize, then they can navigate the global climate policies and actions. So this is what we understand as that, for example, we are having 47 NAP projects. So these NAP projects are financed internally as well as externally, and this mobilizes $1.06 billion. Now, move on to the climate financing. So in the working group, we need to mobilize finances from internal sources, from external sources, and we need to leverage market-based financing, and we need to go for the innovative financing modalities and instruments. As said, that not only reliance on the grants, but we can look for co-financing, for example, PPP approach, and we can also leverage innovative financing instruments that go beyond grants and concessional loans, for example, equity and guarantee, so that we can design bankable adaptation projects in that area and leverage the private financing, because only public financing might not be adequate, and the space for grants, these are shrinking. So with this context, I think we need to mobilize finances, innovative finances, mechanism-wise and instrument-wise. For example, blending the instrument, concessional financing and equity, or concessional loans and equity, or grants and equity. Now, the point is, if we design a project and finance it, for example, logic project that was cited in the keynote, we have two logic projects, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 mobilizes $37 million for 70 union council areas, and phase 2 is gonna mobilize $223 million in coverage of 300 union councils against 4,556 union councils. And over the year, if we look at the temporality of it, the year span is 10 years. Then do we kind to say that this locally adaptation need in the union councils of 4,556, we need only this amount of money, only for these 376 councils? Definitely not. We need to scale and speed, depending on the urgency of financing. And final words, I would say that sustainability of the intervention, that must be owned by the local governments and the local financing bodies and the local communities, and that interventions should be so designed that these are integrated with the market value chain. So the more we can, we do have the responsibility for public good. This is what the government can deliver, but government alone cannot address and cannot meet the financing requirements. So when we integrate the interventions with the market value chain, for example, in the agriculture sector, for example, in the livestock and fisheries, for example, in the biodiversity-based and ecosystem-based productivity, then we can definitely align with the productivity, and we can establish a sustainable business model. So we need catalytic financing, but we need at the same time scaling and speeding, not only in terms of interventions, but also in terms of a paradigm shift in the policy and institution. And this is what BCDP is up to, and this is what Economic Relations Division is up to. Now it is time to see how we can really deliver this commitment. But at least we can say we have started the process, and BCDP and ICFC that ERD has established as a think tank to support knowledge-wise, because climate action is highly knowledge-intensive. As Sir said about the data-driven approaches is important, as Dr. Mukherjee said. So ICFC, International Climate Finance Cell, incubated in the ERD, is kind of that think tank that can support knowledge-wise, expertise-wise, and skill-wise, and innovative finance mobilization and leveraging that instrument-wise. This support is being provided to the BCDP Working Group 2, external financing, and we are connecting with the internal financing as well. Thank you very much.
What a great discussion. Thank you, Dr. Sadi, for your very insightful commentary when you are an insider in making the decisions on climate finance. So I'm going to quickly summarize what was discussed today. Across today's discussion, speakers collectively underscored the urgent need for equitable, locally led climate adaptation that recognize geographic and social disparities. Our champion Rofa in her keynote highlighted the disproportionate allocation of climate finance between coastal and hilly regions, both from national and global sources. She emphasized that left behind hilly communities remain largely excluded from planning and investment. Her core message was clear: there is no one size fits for all solution. Adaptation must be shaped by geography, context, and people, ensuring that solutions are genuinely locally led. Our eminent Professor Saiful drew attention to the lack of accessible data and modeling, especially for hard-to-reach areas that are already facing severe climate impacts. He stressed that without better data, effective planning remains limited. From BRAC, Ashley acknowledged that ongoing challenges in mobilizing climate finance, but argued that a right-based approach to support the most vulnerable is even more critical. She introduced BRAC's 4 approaches: delivering finance to strengthen livelihood and economic resilience, empowering communities rather than fostering dependence, leveraging blended finance for broader impact, and promoting participatory data collection and improved access to climate services. Youth Jumo, speaking as a youth leader, shared insights from youth-led engagement in the cyclone preparedness program. She emphasized that young people can play a vital role in monitoring and social auditing interventions. Interestingly, she rightly commented on the use of AI and emerging technology. Youth are increasingly equipped to contribute meaningful to climate resilience efforts. Finally, Dr. Sadi reminded us that climate finance is not only about how much money is available, but how effectively it is distributed, particularly to those in remote areas. He noted that while policy reform is often spoken of as a cliche, real reforms are currently underway in Bangladesh. He had stressed the need for the National Adaptation Plan to establish stronger synergies between climate action, finance, and the right actors. And most importantly, the synergies not only across national ministries but also at the global level could be pivotal in accessing needed climate finance. So he also suggested the utilization of climate finance like PPP or blending of concessional grants and equity. So having said that, thank you very much for your thought-provoking and insightful discussion. So let's conclude today's session and thank you again.